The way I identify myself is, first of all, as a wife and as a mother on the most basic levels. Beyond that, professionally, I'm an educator, but then I think a large portion of my life is about advocacy. As a veteran, as a lesbian, as somebody who's gender nonconforming, and now most recently as a breast cancer thriver. My friends would describe me as being the most ridiculous person they know. I think that they like being around me because they know there's always going to be laughs, but that there's always going to be conversation that is thoughtful and that is tough and that are deep conversations, because what I try to bring to every day is things that we don't like to talk about, but also the mix of humor that needs to be there so that we can get through those difficult conversations. I secretly love One Direction would be the first thing about me that most people don't know. And I think that's probably a big thing because a boy band obsession from a 40-year-old is a little strange. Secondly, I think what a lot of people don't know is that I come off as very tough and like have this rough exterior, that there's this humor and this laughter, but there's also an enormous amount of empathy and caring and deep emotion that I carry with me every single day. And then the last thing is that I make the most amazing kale. And most people don't know that because I actually myself hate kale, but my wife and my son love it. So I eat potato chips on those nights and I make big, huge batches of kale for them. So I was first diagnosed in January of 2016 as stage 2, and at that point really had a very positive outlook about like I'm just gonna do this and I'm gonna get through it, and it's gonna be hard, but I can do it. And so 6 months of chemo, and then in the process I found out that I was BRCA1 positive, so I also decided to prophylactically have my tubes and ovaries taken out. And I decided that I really wanted to minimize the amount of surgeries I was going to have. So at once I decided to have a double mastectomy and have my tubes and ovaries taken out. And that was about a month after I finished chemo. And at that point, I felt like I had been through hell and back, but just hearing that I was cancer-free, I felt like I had won. And about 6 months later, in February, I went in for a routine scan of my chest, and they saw a small spot and were concerned. And so they said, it's too small to do anything right now. Please come back in 3 more months. And so in 3 months I came back and it grew a little bit. And at that point, this was in May of 2017, and I think I knew then in my heart, when I really think about it, I knew because I had read enough to know the signs and symptoms were there, and I had this cough and I wasn't feeling well, and I knew just something wasn't right. So they told me, it's still not big enough to biopsy yet, we'd like you to come back. And in June of 2017, my son's father suddenly passed away of cardiac arrest. And so my biggest fear in working through this has always been to leave him motherless. And now my biggest fear was to leave him parentless. And so I reluctantly went back and had another CT scan, and I knew that I wasn't well. And it was on a Thursday afternoon, the doctor said, in July of 2017, and the doctor said, so we need to do lung surgery to remove these 2 parts because we can't get to them any other way, and we want to resect your lung, and we'd like to do it on Monday. And I said, oh, you can't do it on Monday, I'm getting married in 2 weeks. And the doctor said, but we need to do it sooner than later. And I said, you're gonna have to wait until that's over. And I said, I'm gonna dance and I'm gonna live and I'm gonna drink at my wedding and I'm gonna have fun and I'm not gonna have tubes coming out of me. This has taken enough out of my life. So we got married September 1st of 2018 and 2017. We got married in September 1st of 2017, and on September 12th I went in and had lung resection, and it was found that it was had moved to my lung, that both spots were positive for cancer cells. I think I cried all the way home, and I'm not a crier, so when I got out of the car and my eyes were red, my wife knew right away when I walked in the house, and I didn't even need to say anything to her. We decided that we needed to sit my son down sooner than later and talk to him, but I also decided there was words at that point that I wasn't going to use, and he's 17, so he can Google. So I was very careful about the words I used, and I said, it's breast cancer and it's back and it's in my lungs. But I refused to, at that point, use stage 4, terminal, or metastatic, because I know what happens if you Google that. And this is a kid who stayed home from school one day with a cold, and when I got home, he ran out of the house and told me I had tuberculosis. So I was thinking, I'm definitely not going to use those words. It's changed my relationship in the way with them that I am more real. I'm definitely more emotional and more genuine. So the most challenging things are the unknowns and just never knowing. I think I was very naive to believe that the scans would get easier. In the teetering between wanting to be hopeful and wanting to be really positive, but then being a realist and knowing that even if it's not active, this disease is in me somewhere. It's just not progressing or it's not active right now, but I know it's there. So balancing the hope and balancing the realism is very difficult. The unknowns are hard, and I thought between the scans that if I made it to a scan and I didn't have any active disease, then it would be like, whew, I can rest until the next scan. But instead what happened is, the only way I can explain it is that every 3 months, it's like there's a truck that's driving towards me, and this truck is going about 5 miles an hour, and the closer that it gets to the 3 months, the truck starts to speed up, and it's driving faster and faster and faster, and I can't move until the day of the scan, and the doctor walks in and either says, we see more disease or we don't. Then I know if the truck veers off and doesn't hit me for that, or if it just hit me full blast again. And going through that every day is very difficult. I also struggle with some mental health diagnoses from when I was in the military. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And so with post-traumatic stress disorder, unknowns and anxiety and hypervigilance of being worried that something bad is going to happen is constantly there. And so you add a diagnosis like metastatic disease to that, and there's some that say metastatic disease and cancer alone causes PTSD. So you add a disease of constant unknowns to a mental health concern that's always has a fear of constant unknowns, and there kind of seems to be chaos running around in my brain. And so it's taken a lot of coping skills and a lot of time to kind of deal with those things and really work through those. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with simultaneous diagnoses of mental health issues and of cancer diagnoses, and that it is a very difficult thing, and it's not easy to talk about, because you talk about metastatic disease and people shy away from that because they don't want to talk about death and they don't want to talk about illness. And you talk about mental health and people want to steer clear of that because nobody wants to talk about mental health. And so you add those two things together, and on top of it, my post-traumatic stress disorder is actually the result of a sexual assault. And so I add that, and then cancer feels like something that has taken over my body and done whatever it wants, and I have no control, which is just very reflective of the same feelings that I had when I was assaulted. So the challenges faced there are mixing all of those things together and kind of figuring out, okay, what do I do here, and what do I work on, and what do I concentrate on? Because if my mental health health isn't good, my physical health isn't going to be good. If my physical health isn't going to be good, my emotional health and my personal life and my professional life is impacted, and it just becomes a cycle of all of these things kind of flow together. And so those have really been the challenges of, this isn't just a physical thing that I have to deal with. There are so many different facets of everything that somebody with metastatic disease faces. The most important thing in the world to me is to know that my son and my wife will be taken care of after I'm gone. I'm not in denial that this disease at some point will claim my life, and I want to know that they're going to be taken care of. I've always had that provider role, and always have been a mother since I was 22 years old, so that is now almost the majority of my life. So knowing that my son is taken care of, that my wife is taken care of, are things that are always on the forefront of my mind and kind of guide every decision that I make, because they're really important to me.